assessing risk. So the first thing to say is that the job of assessing risk isn't yours. And there's a few reasons for that. The first one is you aren't objective. This is your life, this is your experience. So it's very much from your perspective only. Risk assessment is a process within a framework, and you are not privy to that or trained in that. And even if you are, say for example your background was social work, then this is still the first point applies. This is your experience and it puts a different slant on it. And finally, there are a variety of factors which affect risk, which you may not take into consideration. And I tell you all of that because I'm about managing your expectations, getting you prepared for the court process. And part of that is being very honest about the process. And so you need to know why your assessment of risk isn't valid in this. But what we're going to look at is how you can show and lead to giving them the evidence that they need to assess it properly. So I'm going to show you, obviously my background is social work, so I'm going to show you the social work model of assessing risk. So while there's no doubt that no one knows what you've been through better than you, your opinion is objective, it is biased. That doesn't mean it's wrong, but it does mean that your own experience impacts your opinion. And one of the most important things you can do is separate your experience from your child's. And research shows that two people can witness the exact same event but recall it incredibly differently. You are not your child and your child is not you, and therefore your experiences will be different even if you were both present. And it's really important that you recognise this, not only because it will show a greater level of empathy and understanding, but also because you're going to be able to meet your child where they are, not where you are. And if you have been in a coercively controlling relationship or your ex is an alienator, then this one thing will massively help to protect your relationship, as it's the basis for a secure attachment. Professionals are trained to assess and manage risk and to protect children. They have the tools and skills in order to do so. I would take a look at Kevkas's website and access their tools for professionals to see how they assess domestic abuse and coercive control and alienation. And this will help you to understand the language and behaviour they are measuring your experience against. These assessments will typically be carried out under Section 7 or maybe a Section 37 of the Children's Act. If social services are involved, they will do an initial child in need and maybe a child protection assessment depending on the severity of the risk. Each local authority has their own structure and name for these things, so make yourself familiar by visiting your local authority's website and searching for child protection. As a rule though, they do all use the Common Assessment Framework as their starting place and what all the assessment tools are built upon. I've provided you with a graphic of that. What this does, it shows you all the areas of a child's life that they are assessing, and these form the basis of their reports. So in complex cases involving personality disordered parents, in my opinion, it is always necessary to employ an expert under Practice Directive 25. The reason for this is social workers aren't mental health professionals, and personality disorders come under the remit of that medical model. And so social workers aren't trained to recognise that, and they can easily miss it. Even though they've got their training in that, we know personality disorders they can present very well. They don't present as someone with a mental health problem. They can present as very charming, very organised, and emotionally seductive. And so an expert would be needed. So a family assessment will assess the dynamics and then the associated risk. And then they will then provide the court with recommendations based on their findings. I recommend, as part of the selection process, which you will be able to be involved with, looking for professionals who have the following specialities: attachment, which is an absolute must, family systems theory, trauma, and if you feel it necessary, personality disorders. For those of you that are experiencing alienation, there are experts who claim to be parental alien experts, but this brings two issues. Firstly, it's a lucrative area. So there will be charlatans out there. I would check their qualifications and training against that list. Make sure that they do understand exactly what parental alienation is. And the second one is, if you suggest someone who is a parental alienation expert and your ex who refuses to admit that alienation is happening, they're not going to allow them. So choose someone whose website, although it just talks about their training, might not necessarily mention parental alienation, or it might mention it but just as one of a number of things. It's not the only thing that they do. It's a shame, because actually there's some that are really brilliant that have sort of niched themselves into that. But like I say, if you've got an ex, unless the court have identified its alienation and want a parental alienation expert, you're not going to get that person through the door. Once the level of risk has been identified by the expert, whether that be through the CAFCAS report, social services report, or a psychologist report, then the final step is to manage it. And this is partly where you come in, because you are the one who's going to have to deal with them, but also where the order is going to become useful as well. And that's what we're going to look at next.